How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, great discussion today. We're going to talk about the role of leadership in empowering Generation Z at the workplace. So briefly, we're going to go over the different generations, give a slight difference between each one. But our focus today is going to be on Generation Z, which is the up-and-coming workforce. So right now, it's pretty much millennials because their numbers are increasing. And then you got the new crew coming in, which is Generation Z. And that means that the baby boomers, Generation X, we're kind of starting to slowly step out. It's going to be a great discussion. I'm going to have Russ Hamilton and Joe Pomponio on. But real quick, guys, just want to let you know some of the books we have on the market. All right. And guys, don't forget, if you're in Orlando, Florida, William Young's out there, American Jail Association Conference. So look it up. He's there signing his books. So we have Inmate Manipulation Decoder. This book is available and on the market. It's available on Amazon. Link to that's in the description. This book is used for training all across the country. So if you haven't gotten it, get it. It's got a lot of good information in here. I also have another book that's going to partner well with these books here. It's coming out soon about inmate behavior, managing inmate behavior. It's probably going to be a little bit bigger than this book. And right now it's in the editing process, but we're going to get that out as quick as we can. We also have How to Succeed in Corrections, Lessons Learned While Working in a Prison. This book's it's just filled with tons of thoughts related to the corrections profession, especially if you want to make this a career and you really want to have some advice that can navigate you through some of the unknowns in this profession. And this book is published by Blue 360 Media. Link to that is also in the description. And that leaves us with our other book, Tips for New Correctional Officers and Their Supervisors. This book also got tons of advice in it. Also available through Blue 360 Media. And guys, again, these books work well together. So if you get a chance, check out the links, pick up the books, get them together, and just have fun. Open up those books, learn, and then try to apply the knowledge that's in these books into the real world. And then when we get the other book out there, you complement that, and then it's just mountains of knowledge, growing and growing. All right, so let me get Russ on first. What's up, Russ?
Anthony, how's it going this morning, sir?
Good. I'm having a peanut butter bagel.
Very, very nice. Very nice. I still have hours to go before my intermittent fasting is over with.
All right. Well, Russ, do you mind in between that time to introduce yourself?
Yeah, certainly. My name is Russ Hamilton. I am a former correctional sergeant. I worked for the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, starting all the way back in the 80s. Started at San Quentin. After retirement, I ended up working for a local juvenile department that was just founded here in California. And so I was a senior juvenile correctional officer there for a couple of years. I now work for a private company, and we do rehabilitation and reentry work for a local county jail and for a local probation department. So anyway, I'm also the founder of Keepers of Chaos. Keepers of Chaos, that's Chaos with a K, on Facebook. And basically, we just try and serve a function amongst the entire correctional community, whether you're an officer, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a nurse, supporting each other and, just bringing, knowledge and training and history to life for people that want to do better at their job, be more efficient, be more safe, be more secure.
Right. And then we also have Joe Pomponio. What's up, Joe?
What's happening, guys? Morning.
Good morning. Joe, you mind introducing yourself, please?
Yes, sir. My name is Joe Pomponio. I'm a retired lieutenant from the Texas Department of Criminal Justice of 30 years. Currently working as an assistant jail administrator in our local county sheriff's department in the jail division and a panel member for Tier Talk.
Yes, and we love having you both. All right, so guys, real quick, before we get into Generation Z, I want to break down, I got some notes from the other generations. Basically, generations are defined by historic events that usually are what people are growing up in and how those historic events actually affect the individual. And then and in this case here, how could it affect the workplace and how we manage them. So the first group are the traditionalists. So they were born between 1918 and 1945. So now if you look at the events around that time, their biggest influence is going to be the Great Depression, which was around 1939, World War II, Pearl Harbor, and the polio vaccine. That's in there too. Their home life growing up was a large family, usually 3 to 5 children. Grandparents were in the home 4 to 6 hours per day with a significant adult role model. They were the generation that knew how to do without, and they were raised in GI families, obviously. They were also called the silent generation. So when you saw them coming into the workplace, they just pretty much was happy to have a job, and they just worked. That's what they did. They didn't question anything. A lot of them didn't even have further ambition besides being on that front line. They were just happy to have a job. And let me give you some of their values. Some of their values are hard work, duty before pleasure. They like law and order. They like adherence to the rules, conformity, patriotism, dedication, sacrifice, respect for authority, and saving and conserving. And that kind of relates to the Great Depression era, right? I mean, money wasn't truly coming in. So at this point here, they're known to save that money, conserve. What to expect at the workplace with them? What do they expect? Sorry, what do they expect from a workplace? They look for a company with a good reputation. They want loyalty. Work is not supposed to be fun in their mind. They want to know procedure and rules. For them, age equals seniority. They prefer in-person formal communication. They're very detail-oriented. They're hardworking, so they like to pay their dues, and they expect other people to pay their dues as well. They want stability. They dislike change, and they prefer a clear chain of command. Anybody want to discuss this real quick or move to the next generation? Or does anybody want to talk about traditionalists, or you want me to keep moving? It's your call.
No, I'm for keeping on moving on, but
all right, Joe, anything?
Yeah, we can keep moving on. Russ can tell us about the Great Depression later.
Actually, Russ's generation's not even in here. All right, let's see. Okay, so now we got the baby boomers. So we're looking at 1946 to 1964. So what do we have?
That's me.
That's you?
That's me.
Joe, is that you?
Hell no.
No, okay. It's not me yet either. So what's the biggest things impacting this generation? You got television was invented. You have JFK's assassination. You have Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement. You got the Vietnam War, space race. You got Nixon's resignation. So there's a couple of things. Their home life growing up was their post-war babies. This was the time for social change. That's why you had the civil rights movement, stuff like that. They're very optimistic. Family was living in the suburbs. They had a 2-parent family. Mom usually stayed at home, and it was like the American dream was being promised. So now you got, for them, baby boomers, this is what they value. Ethical behaviors. They're very idealistic. Spend now, worry later. They do challenge authority, and that makes sense. I mean, think about that. The civil rights movement, that I believe during the baby boomers' time, there started to become a distrust for government. Let's see. We got lead by consensus. They're anti-war, anti-government to some extent, and they're workaholics, and they believe in some level of personal gratification. So what do they expect at work? They invented the 50-hour work week. Let's see. Work ethic has to be worth it. They have to have a job that's worth it. Work is the anchor to their life. They value team collaboration. They strive to do their best. They want a flexible route to retirement. That's fair. They want a democratic hierarchy. So now you can start to see the shift away from that command and comply structure. Work needs to be an exciting adventure. Anxious to please, but is willing to challenge the status quo. Dislikes conflict and change, which kind of, I don't know, it's kind of a bit of a conflict there, but that's what it says. Wants to hear other ideas matter. Want to hear that their ideas matter. Motivated by responsibility to others, and doesn't take criticism well. All right, let's see. Now go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, so, that being, where I came in. So I was I was born at the very tail end of that in 1963. And I mean, I think those are all, generalities. Obviously,
Right.
I don't think that there's too many people that are beholden to every single one of those. When I look back to where you were talking about the originalists and the traditionalists, who have that strong sense of believing in authority. I think I have a certain facet of that was instilled in me or became part of my makeup. But then, by the same token, a rich and deep distrust of that same authority at the same time. I think that I'm really very much on the side of being a constitutionalist, but the kind of constitutionalist that knows that I don't get to pick who the Constitution applies to. Everyone has those civil rights. Until they destroy them. But I'm also, really very pro being, hard on crime. Number one, to avoid more victims, but number two, to give people the opportunity to change and to give that up. And I think that in some ways that's why I've covered the entire spectrum now of corrections. With doing some of the hard, dirty, dangerous work that I did through my career, but at the same time, now trying to work, in the rehabilitation and reentry field, but obviously acknowledging that there is a level of not total futility with that, but some futility and difficulty, but not to the point where I feel like I'm some do-gooder who just thinks that the answer is destroying accountability. For me, accountability is number one in that. So I don't know, kind of a few different things there to pick from.
Well, obviously we know the art generalizations, but also I think for us too, we were raised by the older generation, so we wind up picking up qualities from both sides. One, stuff that's being passed down, and stuff that we get introduced to from the environment when we're finally released into the world. So now Generation X, that's my generation, that's Joe's. And basically we were born between 65 and 80. Now, again, guys, when you do this research, timeframes are usually off by a couple of years in certain ones, but this is where I seem to be the most consistent when I was looking it up. So the biggest influencer here is personal computers, fall of the Berlin Wall, the Challenger disaster, end of Cold War, and first Gulf War. Now, even though the Challenger disaster actually happened after that, we grew up in it because I think the Challenger was around 1983, I think, or 85. So that's mid 80s. And this year, 84, was it 84? Okay.
I think it was 84.
Yeah, I know it's within that range. So now you have home life growing up was increasingly both parents worked. You have the latchkey kids. I was definitely one. I didn't really have a curfew. I just, went out and went home. Increased single parent households. So you're looking at divorce rates. And I believe that was a big thing for single parenting. Also, don't forget, guys, around this time, this is the time where you had a lot of kids being kidnapped at this time. These are a lot of times we find those, what's the guy, the clown killer, John Wayne Gacy.
John Wayne Gacy. Yeah.
Gacy, yeah. Then you have the less parent-child time and the tough love parenting. And then what they value is, okay, so this is what me and Joe would value. Balance, diversity, self-reliance, informality. So we're breaking away from the hierarchy structure to some extent. Independence, self-sufficiency, and fun. And then what do they expect at work? They want a work-life balance. I think this is the first time. Generation X is the first time that's introduced, actually. Because remember, the generation before, we're starting to break away from the obedience of authority. So at this point here, you had the baby boomers introducing the 50-hour week. The Generation X was like, nah, we need to balance life and home, life and work. Adaptable, can move easily between jobs, more technically savvy, loyal to managers. So there is a loyalty there. Work to live, work smarter, will test authority. That's the. So I don't know if they're outright disrespectful to authority. Let's just maybe that's where the extreme is. Prefers a more casual work environment. Work is just a job. That's the work-life balance aspect. Looking for a forward-thinking company. Good task managers. They do want feedback and timely. And they do question some of the practices or the institutions, and they're skeptical. And they value independence at work, as we talked about. All right, so the last one. No, sorry, it's not the last one. We got two more. Generation Y, which is the AKA millennials. That's the ones that were from 1981 to 1995, 96. So these are the people that really started pioneering technology in the workplace. So you got September 11th. They got the internet, smartphones, the Columbine massacre, the O.J. Simpson trial. Home life growing up was often children of single parents. They were sheltered. Home life is child focused. They were overparented, maybe because now parents felt they had to be more protected, protect their children more. And children with says that they were children with schedules. Then the next part is Generation Y. They're hotly competitive. They're fun. They're in the now. They're self-confident. They're big on spirituality, civic duty. They look for achievement. Remember, that was the big thing where the millennials were, second place needs a trophy too. Or everyone gets a trophy. Is that what it is? Everyone who participates gets a trophy. That's what it is. They're tech savvy because remember now it's introduced. This is the generation where it's introduced, and it's a global community. So the workforce right now is starting to make up a lot more of the millennial side. So technically, you're going to have the millennials leading the Gen Z, while the baby boomers and the X Gen are exiting. What do they expect at work? They want innovation, so they want people to think out of the box, which I think is what's happening now with our profession. Sociable, makes workplace friends. They believe in that. They like at ease teams. They're digitally savvy. They tend to be multitaskers. They have a strong sense of entitlement. They're ambitious. Basically, what's next? Globally minded. They want to balance work with life as well. Community involvement and self-development. They like immediate feedback, wants mentoring from supervisors, collaborative and creative, and wants to be challenged. Okay, now the last one, which is our Gen Z. Now, this is basically the up-and-comers in the workforce. And we're looking at 1996 to present. So, I mean, you may see people in their 20s now entering the workforce, entering corrections, and they could fall in between the end of millennials or the beginning of Gen Z. But at this point here, when you start getting closer to that Gen Z time frame, you could assume they're Gen Z. So their biggest influencers is first AA president, Great Recession, marriage equality, digital natives, and climate change. So remember, they got into the workforce when it was already digital savvy. Hey, what's first AA president? What is that?
African American.
Got it. I thought that's what it was. I know I put it there for a reason. I couldn't remember what I put it there for. Maybe I didn't want to put African American. Now we just released it. Damn it. I don't know what happened there. Sorry. I don't know how that gets so political. You never know what you can say or can't say. Okay. So home life growing up, they were affected by that recession of 2008 and 2009. Social minded, raised to make an impact, inclusive in classrooms. They're non-traditional families, or a lot of them come from non-traditional families, and the return of extended family households. And now what do they value? Security. They do value competition. So I see that. Independence and entrepreneurship. So they want to kind of take on their own things. And what do they expect at workplace? They expect more face-to-face, which a lot of people think actually these new individuals only want to communicate digitally. No, when they want to see the higher up, they want to see that person face-to-face. That's true. Maybe amongst each other, they're communicating, but they believe that their time is worth being seen face-to-face by the higher ups. So maybe through peers, it works digitally, but they do want that face-to-face. I agree with that. Let's see. They're digital natives, which we talked about. They want to be catered to, want to make a difference, but motivated by a secure life. Positive work relationship is very important to them. They actually, some of them do have work priority, but they still want to balance, but they do understand the seriousness of what they do, but it could be related to that competitive nature. values information on demand, which makes sense. They got access to Google. Multitask. I mean, shit, phone, all this other stuff, that makes sense. The funny thing is you really can't effectively multitask. Your mind doesn't work where it could focus on two things at once. Eventually it loses focus of the other, but that could be a concern. May require additional training with well, that's something else. And may pick up tasks more quickly. All right. So mind you, when I take some of this stuff and I try to merge them, all this stuff is not coming from correction sense, coming from business stuff. So that customer one snuck in there. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, so we're not going to go ahead and focus today's discussion on the commonalities of bridging all these generations together, because technically you're going to start seeing the traditionalists. They're going to start heading out. Baby boomers they're in there, but they're starting to move out. And so basically it's really the millennials and the Gen Z, and Generation X is going to have to work amongst them. Millennials and Gen Z do have a lot in common. But the big thing here is I just want to focus on dealing with Gen Z in corrections. Now, I'm going to say something. I have a list of things that I want us to note. Now, granted, this is the tough part, but I have to kind of make sure that I give out the right advice here. We have to adapt to what's coming in. It's not the other way around. So when we're talking about recruitment efforts and retention efforts, whatever it is, we have to be the ones that must adapt in order to keep these individuals here with us. Now, granted, when I say adapt, I don't mean that we adapt to the absolutes of how they think. We could communicate with them and see where they're coming from and try to meet somewhere in the middle. And that's what most of our dialogue is going to be today, is basically try to understand their perspective, but in an effort, break them into reality as well, but also, don't be so rude about it. I mean, you're going to have to bring them into this world, and they are going to expect to have some level of guidance. And it doesn't mean that we're getting softer. It means that we're focusing more on our human skills with this generation than we ever did before, where the last generations, we focused on those hard skills, the technical, the tactical, the command compliant. This generation is really more moved by the human side of our managing of people, or our leadership. So before we go into that, I want to make sure if you guys have any thoughts before we introduce into Gen Z. But guys, you would agree. I'll start with Joe first and Russ. Is that now we do have to make we're the ones that have to adapt in order to get these people to remain in this profession. So we're not going to say we compromise. But we're going to really have to see where they're coming from and try to see where we could build a bridge instead of, creating more walls. Would you agree with that, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, I was a Gen X that grew up with pretty much traditionalist values. It's drummed into my head, and coming in, we didn't question authority. We came in, we did our job, we did what we were supposed to do, and we went on about our time. We dedicated our loyalty to our jobs. As a supervisor, I found out, as we progressed and got up there in time and age, is that the people coming in now are it's not so much their job to change their values for us, but it became mostly our job to change our values for them in order to be able to retain employees, because, they were coming in such strong numbers during the late 90s or mid to late 90s, when we had a big prison boom here, where we went from 30 units to over 100 units within like a 4-year period. And, the people that were getting in weren't the ones with the old school values. These were a younger generation that, had expectations of their own.
Right. So I don't know if you were done with that. All right. So, and I that's what kind of me and Russ were touching on before, where you may grow up in that era, but your direct influence could still come from the people that raised you. My father was born in 1934. He did work a few jobs, but I really mostly know him when he was working for the Postal Service. And he didn't really make any effort to move up. He was just happy being the janitor there and just doing his work and coming home. And what he did was, when he came home, his day was over. He didn't really he was, by the way, he took care of us. So this is not saying that, but to speak truthfully, he wasn't really as involved with us you know, I did my job. I worked. I'm bringing money to the table. Now it's my turn to rest when I get home, and you know, my mom would then go ahead and manage whatever aspects she could. But my father was at that time was the one going out, work, breadwinner. So I love how we kind of mentioned in that, even though you're from another generation, if you're raised from the generation before it, you're getting a mix of both values. That was great how both you guys introduced that thought. Russ, what's your thoughts real quick before we move into the Gen Z?
Yeah, so you know, I think that like my first thoughts when you said, you know, we were going to do this morning before I had my coffee was like, what in the hell is Anthony talking about? You know, then I started to get some coffee in me, you know, and then we started the conversation here. And then you know, we got some definitions, you know, and I started to try and think about it, you know, my personal mission, but you know, also my mission within Tier Talk and with Keepers of Chaos, you know, is to help anybody and everybody in this profession. That's literally what I've dedicated myself to. And so then I got to think about it, you know, well, should we actually, you know, be forced to adapt, you know, to Gen Z? What is it that we're seeking to accomplish? And, you know, there's really a lot of, you know, conflicting things out there. So I started to try and look at, you know, what is a thread that maybe Gen Z would be putting down that I've picked up on the past. And what I came up with was this. You know, I've long been a proponent of, you know, better training and not training the old way that we used to do things, you know, and we've talked many times on this program about sink or swim. I'm not an advocate. I do think that, you know, in the times that I grew up and stuff, I think that my generation was overall tougher. But I think that sometimes because we were tougher, we thought the only way was to go with toughness. And so we kind of, you know, sacrificed being smart and being clever, you know, with our training values with just being tough, because we thought that that's the result that we would get. That was the result that we needed. I think that, though, that there's a lot better ways to go about training these people. And I also think that, you know, if we're smarter and we do it the right way, that they can blossom and we can pass on some of the things that are good about some of the ways that we modeled and did things, you know. But I look at that generation and it gives me pause because some of the things that are, you know, that come out right now, you know, these people that are senselessly protesting things and taking over buildings, and they can't even articulate what it is that they're protesting, and they certainly can't do it within the confines of, you know, a rational conversation. It's just all about, oh no, you have to be silenced, you have to be canceled, and there's no sense of respect for the civil rights of anyone. I think that we're in for some tough times in this country, you know, and across the world. But at the same time, I want to lend myself to, you know, corrections is something that's really needed. And I think that, you know, being able to find some common ground and to be able to, you know, work with each other's values and showcase the things that we're able to, that I came up with and that you came up with.
Yeah, and guys, remember, as we mentioned, the Z's are also being influenced by the millennials because they're the ones that are probably raising them in these households. So you have to kind of look at both generations and how they kind of bleed towards each other, where maybe you do have a Z who's being raised by a grandparent, but that may only bring them to, sadly, a Generation X or a, baby boomer. So again, you have to look at, you know, if you're looking at these stereotypes, you have to not just look at their age, but where their greater influence is coming from. So I believe that if you look at the millennials, it makes sense why the Z's could be going more towards a, I don't want to always say softer side, but at least in the workplace, they expect, they're a little bit more me driven. And that's fine. I mean, we just got to figure out why or understand that perspective. So what I did was I took some notes here. One of the first things I took about when I wrote about was, in order to start this dialogue, I like to find commonalities. A very big commonality I found, or generality. So I meant generality, is that you may have stubbornness versus innovation. Because if you think about, well, I guess so. If you think about the commonalities between some of the older generations, especially the traditionalists, they were stubborn in their ways. This is what we wanted done. And then you start to see, or this is what needs to be done. And then you start to see levels of freedom, and then ultimately forward change. So, people went from being stubborn with the way things are to having a little bit more freedom so they can maneuver around and make decisions, until outright innovation and change, where now they're going back and not just having more freedom and decision-making, but outright changing the status quo. So that's a big difference from command and compliance to challenging the status quo. And in the middle is that sense of freedom. And I think, to be honest with you, with the newer generations, they are more geared towards challenging the status quo. Basically asking why and why and why. So they can try to see if they can understand their relationship to that job. And if they can't, they may try to maneuver to where they can connect to it. And if they can't connect to it, they're out. I mean, they're out. And I'll get to that. But basically, if they can't find purpose behind the work that hits to them personally, they're out. So let's start with a couple of things here. So we all agree, though, at this point, we have to build bridges and not walls between generations, right? So that's the big key of this dialogue. And I think because the Zs are the up-and-comers, we've done work with millennials before on this channel, I thought that we could focus more on how to introduce the Zs to this profession, because right now recruitment's here and we need them in this profession. So these are the people that are going to help our pensions. These are the people that are going to help us from being mandatory. So we are going to have to compromise a bit. When they come in, we're going to have to welcome, as we should. They're coming in to save us our overtime. They're coming in to help make sure we have a pension. Why are we not hugging them just on that level? But either way, so let's do this first. So the first note I have for Gen Z is that Gen Zs, they want value pushed more towards them, and they want more loyalty from the employer. Where back in the day, as you could see on the extreme, it was, we were lucky to have a job and we gave our loyalty to the job because we were lucky to have one. Where here, they're coming in with, and guys, it's not a negative stereotype, just hear me out. They may come in with a higher level sense of entitlement, thinking that, the job needs them because these are the things that I know I can give to this job. So when they come in and you don't immediately find value for something that they're bringing in on the table, they automatically look at that as saying, you know what is this job doing for me? I think that's one of the differences in today's world. And that may have started with the millennials, is where when we got lucky to have a job, we did whatever we could to go ahead and make sure the job knew that we were going to do what we can for them. And even in the baby boomer side, that was when people became more competitive and they started to try to move up. It was still about competition within what I can do for the job. I think as you start moving from Generation X to millennials to Z, it's more about what can the job do for me. And at the Z side, that question is going to be a little bit more extreme on that end. What's your thoughts on that? I will go with Russ first.
So, I think that, it's a valid question, I think, for anybody to ask, is what can the job do for me? What is the reason that I'm getting into this? And, I think that the departments, need to work at providing the highest value that they can. I actually have a talk on this somewhere out there on the internet that I call STEP, which is, giving all of your employees, status, training, equipment, and pay. And, I think that's a necessary reward for placing ourselves in harm's way, over, X number of years. I think the problem with the way that Gen Z in general, might look at that, though, is they have no sense of delayed gratification, the number of things and the number of years that I had to do some of the crack jobs or, not have weekends off, piles up, closer to the decade rather than the number of months that I've been in so far. And so sometimes, in general, and because I'm out there on the forums all the time, I see people complaining, well, I have almost a year in now and I don't have weekends off. And I just, my jaw just drops. I mean, holy crap. I think I had like 12 years in before I got a piece of the weekend. But having said that, it is necessary. We have to give them a lot of different things, and we shouldn't be reticent just because they're young, and so forth. We need to provide those things to all of our people, though, and to have the kind of workplace where people can flourish. And that's absolutely the worst thing about corrections is there's too many places where people can't flourish because they have a toxic and poisonous culture. So we want to get away from that anyway. So I don't think that there's anything necessarily at odds there. Like I said, with the exception of they're bad at the delayed gratification part of the equation in their life.
Yeah, and I actually have that coming up. And I want to add something to what Russ is saying. I agree. I think the funny thing is for the earlier generations, what we wanted was more of good salary, benefits, whatever. What they want, because they're also young, they may not realize the importance of good benefits, all that other stuff just yet, is what they want is inner purpose. They want to know, how does this job connect to for me to be inspired, whatever that may be for them. I mean, everybody comes into this job with a different level of purpose. If they feel that, let's say they're entering corrections because they feel that they could be a good positive role model while they're in here, then you have to find a way to connect that profession to that purpose. So when they're asking, what can this profession do for me? I don't think it's more on external incentives. I think it's more on how can I connect to this profession so my life has some level of meaning. I think that may be a little bit more different in regards to how they ask that question or their meaning. Because it's funny, because if they're asking that question and we keep on answering like, well, you're making $100,000 yet, whatever it is, that's not what they want. They want someone to sit down with them, talk to them, and basically, if I was their supervisor or whatever it is, try to draw from them where they find significance, and then try to connect the work that they do in that moment to that higher level significance. And I want to mention one more thing that Russ said. I find that the newer generation, they mix up ambition with long-term goals. If that makes sense. And we'll go into that, but they may have an ambition to run a prison one day. And they want that now. They don't want to wait. Gangi, I've been working here for 6 months. I know the job. And then when you ask them, what's your long-term goal? Well, I want to run a prison. Okay. And when do you want to do that? Within a year. You got to see how that's not a long-term goal, because there's a lot of things that happen in the middle before you're able to do it. So what I would then ask them is, let me ask you a question. Why do you want to run a prison? And then they start telling you all these different reasons why. And then what your job is to, as long as it's not a perk, as long as they're not chasing position for authority, and it's more of where they feel their greatest value could be, now your job is to take that, their wants, whatever those values may be, and try to translate that into the work that they're currently doing. So now they can see the value behind it. Because a lot of people believe that the higher you go, this is where I can have the greatest impact. And it's not really. I think a lot of people mistake that all because you got higher levels of responsibility that you have all the authority to meet it. No, you're actually burdened down with less freedom with all those responsibilities. So I think once you also kind of note that, hey, being above is not what everybody may think it is, and then go ahead and pushing the value of where they're at in the moment, they start to buy in, and they start to see more long-term value in the current job that they're doing. But most of the time when I find them chasing something, they're chasing something for higher meaning. And they believe that the way they can achieve that is by seeking the highest level possible so they can push down a greater impact. What's your thoughts on all that, Joe? Because Russ opened up the door for a lot of good discussion there.
Yeah, I mean, you know, this generation has, I mean, to me, they really have no patience, and their level of compromise with the factors of employment are minimal at best. You know, when they come in with they kind of come in with the self-gratifying tools. You know, if it's not about them, they're not about, anything else. You know, I've seen, this is one of the generations I've seen that are more prone to easily ghost a job. If they don't like what's happening, or if they don't get what they want, they'll just leave and go to another job that may pay less. You know, there's no patience in their thought or rationale when they come to the, correctional setting. You know, the one thing that most of us benefited from here is the fact that we had jobs prior to coming into the corrections field. So we had some sort of employment loyalty, employment expectations. You know, most of these kids, we're recruiting them straight out of high school. I mean, we're literally going to high schools recruiting people to come to corrections. Most of them have never held a job. Most of them, a lot of them don't really respect the employment factor. They, some of them don't even respect themselves, let alone respect anybody else. You know, our values growing up, my father was pretty much the same as Anthony's father. You know, when he came home, he did his job. You know, he was in the military, went to Vietnam, the whole works, Korean War. You know, when he came home, he was done. He did his. But the one thing that he did instill was the fact that while you're at work, you gave everything that you have. You respected your authority. You respected your elders. And, I was blessed enough to grow up in a household where my mom didn't have to work because dad sometimes worked 2 and 3 jobs just so mom can be home with the kids to make sure that they had a stable home life. That's something you don't have now. Kids are raising kids. You know, both parents are having to work, full-time jobs, sometimes 2 full-time jobs just to make ends meet. Therefore, there's no stability there at the house. There's nobody to teach them, any kind of values. So they're learning their values from everything that they see on the news, from their friends, on the streets, and it makes it tough to build that bridge and find some sort of level of compromise because they're so, I don't want to say stubborn and opinionated, but they're so stern on their thought process that there's no give. And that's where our biggest challenge comes in, is trying to get them to waver just a little bit in order to see where we're coming from. But, we find ourselves leaning either far left or far right to try to adapt to get them to, either stay in the profession or, try to change their thought process.
Yeah, and then guys, so here, one of the thoughts I had was they want career growth opportunities and quicker within a few years. Overall, they expect things quicker because the world moves more rapidly than ever before. And then I have in parentheses Instagram. Why did I put that? Hold on. Oh, I know what I did. So this culture here is competitive by nature. And then when you have social media and they see other kids in their age being successful, that may force them to want to move a little bit more quicker in their environment. So it may not necessarily be, there could be some that are perk driven, because if you looked at one of the notes here, it said competitive. So now when you look at social media and everybody only puts the positive highlights, they may feel that they're behind. So what happens here is that they start now trying to want things a little bit more quicker, because now their comparison is coming from the highlights of social media. And sometimes it really does matter when someone walks up to them and kind of shows them reality. Yeah, what you see on social media is a chosen glimpse, and probably not even near how successful on the adverse side, I'm sorry, that someone may really be. So having said that, even with money, there are people that we want to say that they're inspired. So I think, you know what, guys, if you think about it, this was never discussed before, but now my mind is thinking, I think the millennials, right? So they grew up kind of pioneering the internet, right? So having said that, they really did want value and stuff like that. I do think so. I mean, they were very innovative, but it wasn't really built on social media and social comparisons, where the Z generation now has the influence of wanting to be inspired and wanting to be connected from the millennial side, but they also have the competitive side of social media. So now you have two possible concerns that you're dealing with when you're dealing with a Gen Z. You're dealing with one concern of they want meaning, and that could be coming from the household, you know, where they worked with millennials who look for that meaning. And hey, effort matters over outcome, which I do believe in. I do believe in that. Effort matters. But having said that, they're also in constant competition with whatever's posted on social media. So my friend is making 50,000. Why ain't I? And one of the things that I can determine behind that when I'm talking to somebody is when they are asking for money, they may ask that based on their subjective value. And they really may have a perspective of how their 6 months in, for some reason, has given more to the job than people with 10 or 15 years in. So what you tend to have to do is kind of show them, hey, guys, this isn't really about what the results that you could see directly in front of you. This is about the experience that's gained. I'm paying this person here. Let's say Russ Hamilton. Okay, let's say Joe is the Gen Zer, and let's say Russ is my. I'm going to give Russ the X generation. Russ, I'm going to cut you down a couple of years because you look good. You look good. You look good, right? So here I am.
I work hard at it.
So here I am as the millennial, and I'm the boss because that's how it works right now. You know. So I got both you guys coming in. This is just a thought that came to me right now. If I got Joe coming up to me, wanting to go ahead and want more money and all this other stuff, or wants a chance to move, and Joe is going ahead and talking about all the stuff that he's actively contributed the last 6 months, because guys, our rookies are work, but there's significance behind what they're doing. They're learning the job. They're seeing how it all connects. So you expect our rookies to go ahead and do a little work, as long as they're not looking around and they don't feel supported. That's a difference. Obviously, you know, we all do play a role, but there are times where the rookie may work a little bit harder because we're going to be next to them and cultivating them so they understand what the next step is. But in their mind, they may not see that, and they look at Russ, and Russ is pretty much doing nothing. So as a supervisor, when they come up to me and they say, well, I deserve more because I'm working all day. Yeah, but you know, I'm trying to tell you, this is the time where you got to learn. You're not being a slave. You're trying to learn. And Russ is doing nothing. Hey, you know what? When it comes to Russ, though, if I may, Joe, because, you know, just between me and you, Russ is may not be someone that you may see working like crazy right now, but Russ has proven himself during tough times to make good decisions. So right now, Russ, he may be that person that's getting paid on his experience, because when shit hits the fan, I know Russ is going to make the right decisions for me when times are a bit rocky, where you haven't gotten to that point yet. You know, the profession isn't as trying for you, where Russ has gotten 15, 20 years in, where he's been challenged and stuff like that. So Russ's worth may not be in the moment you can see every day. Russ's worth is when shit hits the fan and Russ takes control of the ball. And I do agree. I'll start with Russ first. I think Russ, do you agree with that to some extent?
So situationally, I do agree with that. That's obviously the case in some areas, but you know, but it's also been my experience. You know, I will see and Gen Z. I mean, I guess the jury's a little bit out on them. But, you know, I've seen people, you know, from my generation and from your generation, you know, who, you know, come into corrections and they start out and their goal is to be able to, you know, eke out enough seniority that they get to go in there and bid on the easiest, you know, the easiest post assignment that they can find, you know, and now not all of them. Whereas, you know, some of us went out there and purposefully sought out the harder assignments, did the things like I know, I wanted to be the unit officer in the last place that I was at that I had post and bid, and I was able to bid on it, or the disciplinary officer, which was another one that was active and difficult and lots of inmate contact. But then above and beyond that, after I retired, but then I came back as a retired annuitant. I had all these people say, "Oh, you're just going to take all the tower jobs." I said, "Really? You guys don't know me after all this time." And so I took all the shit jobs where there was lots of conflict, where there was lots of inmate contact, where there was lots and lots of felonies those last 2 years. So I think that it's well said that sometimes these millennials, these Gen Zers aren't going to see what the added value of experience is all about. But by the same time, they might be viewing it in a different light, where they really see that some people just aren't putting out the real effort there. I hope that kind of I don't know. There's Russ, a couple of conflicting things. No,
Russ, it makes sense because remember Russ, it's 100% makes sense. The rookies are going to work more, right? We know that. But back in the day, we had to sink and swim. Let's be honest. Rookies came in, we put our foot up on the desk, and we let them work. But that can't be done today. What needs to be done is, yes, they need to work to understand the value, gain experience, whatever it is, but you got to be next to them and letting them know the importance of the work being done. That's the difference. So I have a feeling when you have these newer group coming in, the newer generation coming in, even though you may want to express that, hey, everything you did, you learned, if they don't see you next to them, or if they don't see you doing something, all of a sudden they become, less motivated, because at the end of the day for me, if I was to assign something, I was usually right next to people, letting them know this is why it has to be done. I think that is more so. You have to kind of guide them through the work, but more importantly, connect the work to something greater. And in this case here, it'd be in their efforts to learn. And I want to mention something too, because you crossed on something. With their attention span, I think we said it before. I think the reason why I do think they have limited attention span to some extent, because social media really has geared that. I mean, I even find myself moving from post to post to post if it doesn't interest me in the front line. So having said that, when it comes to experience or really seeing the weight of somebody is really going above what the title is above their head. It's really going in deeper and deeper and deeper to see what it is that they've done, what it is that they have put forward. When you see people with short attention spans, I think the thing is that's where ambition and long-term dreams get confused. For them, an ambition may not be long-term. So maybe I want to cross into running a prison, but then I'm not planning on doing that for 25 years though. Okay, so back in the day for us, when you want to run a prison, that was almost a career-ending decision. That's something that you decide to do after you put all this amount in. Nowadays, it could be that's where they want to start. And at that point, I don't know where you go after that, but they kind of may want to start at the end, and then not be prepared to remain there and jump out to another profession. So, and I think that, again, I think that really does relate to social media. And I'll give you an example. Here I am. And sometimes, by the way, that competition may not mean they're competing with other people from the same generation. I could come in a year on the job and Russ has 24 years. Russ gets the next position and I want to compete with Russ now. It's not necessarily between the same generation. But now just imagine, guys, if we're actually letting them not explain the difference between hard work and effort to get to that end game, as opposed to them thinking that end game is the beginning. That their ambition is something that should happen right at the beginning, because in their mind, that's where they want to start off. So I think that you have to kind of control that a little bit with them and say, hey, guys, that decision that you want to be this person or this position, that does not come at the beginning of your career because someone owes it to you. That's when you give back to the agency. And that's when the agency decides that this person has done enough to be warranted those positions. What's your thoughts on that, Joe?
Yeah, and you know, and that's one of our biggest issues is that, you know, ambitions versus expectations. You know,
Ooh,
our,
nice.
our generation had the ambition to work towards our expectations. Now the newer generation comes in with the expectations of, you know, they want the values and the respect that, you know, in 2 months that, you know, Russ has shown the agency in 20 years. And, you know, it's hard to differentiate that to them as to you know, why it is that Russ has those values, and why it is that Russ has everything that he has in his 20 years. You know, these new boots come in and just right off the bat, they want everything that, you know, that everybody else has that's already been there 20 years, you know, especially when it comes to positions. You know, you haven't even proven to me that you can count a living, breathing body, but you want me to put you in a perimeter tower, or you want me to put you in a mobile patrol, and me put my expectations into you that you're going to protect my facility from an escape if somebody climbs that fence. You know, and it's hard to discuss with them, and it's hard to get them to understand that, you know, there are things that you have to build yourself up to before you can just, you know, get that wild card and go where you need to go, or go where you want to go. You got to show me that you can do, you got to prove to me that you can do the basics of this job first, you know, counting living, breathing bodies, controlling movement, communication skills, you know, because I'm not going to, you know, and that was one of the things that, you know, they always got pissed off. I'm not going to put you in a position where you haven't proven to me that you have good communication skills, because if something happens, I need somebody on that radio that can, that you know, can handle traffic. You know, and like I said, it's the biggest thing is their ambitions versus expectations from generation to generation. They've kind of shifted over time. They come in expecting everything all at once, where, you know, we knew that we had to work our way up to it.
Yeah, and you know what's funny about this all, guys? I think also, because I'm reading some of the notes here. Let me see. Hold on. The one career growth. So basically here is they don't understand the on-scene hours. And again, I think that's up to us to translate that. So, you know, they may see something in the moment, and that's up front. That's to them, and it's in a moment. And in their mind, maybe this is, you know, a definition of success or failure, whatever it is. And then if you don't translate those on-scene hours of what Russ did that you may not see, or what Russ is doing that you may not see, then they wind up minimizing Russ a little bit. Because again, if they have short attention spans, I think what happens here is they take a situation and they generalize it out, and they may apply it to more things than it actually rightfully deserves. So with that said, like if you tell me as a Gen Z, or hey, great job today, I may take that as, oh shit, I've arrived. I'm ready to be I'm ready to move up to that next level. Again, that relates to the short attention span, the not knowing what it really takes to, you know, go past the situation and really be a great overall. I may say to you, hey, Joe, you're the Gen Zer. Great job on handling that situation today. They may hear, oh shit, as I said, I've arrived. I am that CO now. And I think that's where we have to make sure we compliment them. We also humble them a little bit by saying, hey, great job today. I love the way you're able to do A, B, C, D. Tomorrow, I'm going to show you how that can be utilized for when you're doing this, this, and this. I think for them, because they may not be able to see or have the attention, maybe to some extent, I don't know, to see the effort of continuing moving past that one successful moment, to know that that was just a learning point and not an end game. I see you agreeing with that, Russ. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, not only does it make sense, but, you know, I see a lot of, you know, self-congratulatory behavior on their part in general. And so, you know, when I think about it, you know, I'm always reticent to try and say, hey, you know what, in my career, I've done this, that, and the other thing, because I just think it doesn't play well, you know, especially when your span of experience is so limited, you know. I see all the time out there. I think, every inmate in my pod has great respect for me. And even though I blew that up a little bit, I've actually seen things very close to that on a daily basis coming out of some of the forums. And I think it belies a sense of, you know what, you haven't seen shit yet because you don't understand what the nature of the game facing you even is. And that's why, experience is so important and so powerful. And what they think of experience and what I think of experience are two very different things. Experience to me is years and decades coupled with trial by fire. Their idea about experience is, I was slotted into a spot that did that for 3 months. So,
no.
That's the way it is.
Yeah, and I don't think that's been explained before. So I like the fact that we got that out there. I'm gonna. We already did. They need more guidance, better onboarding process, feedback, mentoring. I agree that when we're bringing in recruits, we do need a better onboarding process. We may need to make sure that whatever we're saying in recruitment translates into the facility 100%. So I think that we may need to be next to them a little more to see how their days are carrying out. And also it gives them someone they can automatically go to right at that point. Because if you don't do that, they could wind up not being able to go to anyone. And then that they could wind up saying, yeah, screw this, I'm out. And like Russ said before, they'll ghost the profession. We talked about they need more meaning and purpose behind their work. We kind of got to that. I want to mention here, okay, so guys, I don't mean to stereotype, but again, we are focused on Gen Z. But again, we're doing this in an effort to see where they're coming from and still make, and adapt and adjust from our level. I put down Gen Z may not know how to have difficult conversations. They may even let fear stop them from having them. So here's where I came with that thought. When Russ said ghosting jobs, sometimes I could be wrong, but sometimes if they have a concern or a conflict, maybe something related to the job, instead of them going to talk it out with whoever the concern may be, they may just decide to quit. They may just decide, you know what, I'm having an issue with Russ. He's my supervisor. I'm not going to go ahead and talk to Russ about it. I'm going to go ahead and just leave the job. I'm out. I think that does happen a lot more than we may think. I think, yeah, some could be leaving for better opportunities, but some could be leaving because something could have happened that requires, back in the day, if me and Russ had an issue, me and Russ would talk about it. I would go right to Russ and say, yo, what are you doing? Hey, what are you doing? And we would figure out a way to move past all assumptions and make it work. That's what we did. But it took courage, because courage is we have to initiate a dialogue that could lead into an argument. But also, I know Russ. Russ knows me. We trust each other. We know what we're about. So I wasn't afraid to have conflict with Russ. Russ wasn't afraid to have conflict with me. We handled what we had to handle. Today, I think trust for Gen Z is a little bit more skeptical. I don't think they automatically trust everyone. And even though we may have a concern with that as well, it was always been my thing where if you were a CO, I trust that we're going to be professional in this dialogue. I would like to think so, even though that's not always 100%. But the one big difference right now is we had the dialogue. I would go to Russ. Russ would go to me, and we had the dialogue. We settled it out, and then we kept trucking forward. Regardless of what the end result was, we kept trucking forward. I think today we could have them that could be a little conflict avoidant. They tend to look to avoid or escape conflict or feelings that are uncomfortable, as opposed to being actively and professionally engaged in it. Again, I'm not saying a wild stereotype, but I would love your thoughts on that. So I'll go with Joe first and Russ. But Joe, again, guys, when we say this, it's to put stuff out there to understand, and then what do we do to go ahead and adjust what we need to do to make sure that we address this. And I guess my solution for this would be is if I know they're coming in and they could be a little conflict avoidant, I think that we have to encourage them to speak up more, make sure that they feel included, so they know that when they have a voice, Their voice, it matters. It has value, but we also have to make sure that they trust us so they can go ahead and let us know if they have concerns over issues or ideas. But go ahead, Joe. Sorry about that. There was a lot there.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. Unfortunately, we're in the generation now of the keyboard warrior. Things don't go their way. They take it to Facebook or Twitter, Instagram, whatever, TikTok, YouTube, and they air all their grievances out there to get some sort of self validation from other folks, without giving both sides of the story. And I've had instances where I've had employees quit suddenly and unexpectedly, and due to an issue with a supervisor. And regardless whether or not they quit, I would still call them. Hey, what's going on? And they would give their side of the story. I'm like, okay, well, why didn't you come to me with this? Why did you take it upon yourself to just quit when it's something that could have been fixed? And a lot of them don't want to fix it, because they don't want the conflict. They don't want to have to face it, or try to resolve it at any level. They just assume get on their little keyboard and bang away. And it's sad because there's been times that there were things that were very easily fixable at my level, that I could have done to help save that employee or keep that employee, but they never really gave me the opportunity, because they had a dead set in their mind that they're walking out that damn door and they're just going to get them another job. Screw it. I was looking for a job when I found this one, kind of attitude. And, that's one of the cycles that we need to break, and the second side of that is, a lot of our supervisors now in this day and age are from that generation. So they themselves are not into the conflict or conflict resolution. So, it's kind of, it makes it difficult for the older generations to not so much clean up the mess, but, help resolve things, because of the fact that you have, not only do you have Gen Z employees, you have Gen Z supervisors that were already dead set in their ways anyway. So it makes it difficult to either build that bridge between the generations or build that bridge within their own generation, because, both sides are not about the conflict resolution. They're about the conflict hitting them. And then they just, they walk away without anybody asking why or what happened.
Yeah. And just with the conflict part, remember if you go a generation prior, the millennials weren't afraid so much of conflict because they love to give that subjective perspective. We all know that. That was one of the biggest things we had with them. But don't forget, they also connected to Gen Xers and baby boomers. A lot of that could have been the households that they were raised in, that they had that sense of conflict. But now I'm saying if you have the Gen Zers, you could be losing the conflict because it's been diluted. Because now it's got to be translated over 2 generations now, as opposed to being directly handed over. So now there could be a level of conflict that they could be avoiding, because to be honest with you, they may not have been raised in a household where, they could have been raised in a household which was extremely supportive. I mean, literally extremely supportive. Remember, so if you have the millennials who were fighting for those achievements, even the ones that didn't participate, or I'm sorry, even the ones that just participated get an achievement award. They're growing up in an environment where there is no conflict. Everybody gets sort of what they want. But now when you get a Gen Zer who's raised in that household where everybody gets what they want, and then they get tossed into the real world of corrections and they meet their first Gen Xer or they meet their first baby boomer, and the first time they're being told, no, you don't get what you want, it's not how it works, they don't know how to engage in that. And I think they may feel a certain way conflicted by it, but I think what they do is, instead of addressing it and trying to solve the feeling that way, because it's maybe harder to do, they avoid the feeling because they're not used to it. And they wind up going somewhere else in the hope that they can, find that welcomeness. But I will say this, though. If you're watching this and you're Gen Zer, Don't do that, because then what happens is the reason why you could be going career to career to career is because you're running from something instead of chasing towards something. You know, you're running away from conflict, which is going to be at every profession. That could be another reason why you go from profession to profession to profession, where at one point you're going to have to stop and say, you know what, I'm going to talk to Russ, because there's a Russ in every profestion.
Well, and that's one of the things is technology has kind of ruined us in that fact, because, you know, when we started, we didn't have the technology. We had no choice but to face that conflict. We had no choice but to talk it out. You know, here I am, you know, Anthony's talking about Gen Zers. I don't like what he says. So instead of just me saying, hey, I don't like what you said, I'm going to put Anthony Gangi on blast on Facebook, telling he's talking shit about all the Gen Zers, how we're worthless and useless and blah, 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 when that wasn't a fact.
Well, because you're right. And Joe,
what makes it even sadder.
I don't want you to skip something, because you're right. What they do, and I think Russ caught it too at the same time, they try to build consensus because they want the support.
That's exactly it.
Right. And it's not about addressing the conflict. It's more about proving who's right or who's wrong.
Exactly. And, you know, and what makes it even sadder is the amount of people that buy into that shit before they even know what the full story is. So, you know, you already got the bridge burnt and you got the masses rallying around you already. You know,
that's what
this thing right here has ruined us over the years. You know, I mean, don't get me wrong. I grew up in the electronics. I was glad I did it. You know, I was hooked from the Atari 2600 until I got my first computer. You know, I was hooked on that shit. Yes, and I'm old enough to say, yes, I'm an old fucker. I was there when the internet got turned on. I can say that. I can admit that. I'm good with that. You know, but the internet coming about was about bringing everybody together. And now the internet is pushing everybody away, you know, because we got so many platforms out there that we can go out there for self-reliance or you know, self-validation.
And
yeah, you know, when I was going to say, you know, when Joe was, you know, bringing up the thing about, you know, quitting, whether it's quiet quitting or ghosting and all that, and you know, brought up you know, some of the stuff with regards to the internet. You know, it just really strikes me. I mean, he's exactly right in that. You know, some of these people, it's just like, well, you know what, I'm just going to unfriend you. And you know, one of the things in, you know, moderating and administrating the you know, a lot of the forums that I'm in, is it always makes me think twice, because, you know, sometimes I'll have an unmanageable individual, and very often they are Gen Zers. And, you know, I just have to try and, you know, build in my own mind, do I let this person continue on? Or do I have to remove them from the forum because what they're doing is just so out of pocket that it's going to be destructive to everybody else. And so, and I think that I don't think that there's any internal conversation in the things that they do. They can just, you know, unfriend you. You know, they can, you know, leave any forum in their life. They can walk out of the job that they've got, and there's just, you know, no sense of permanency or trying to work through it or having that conversation.
And Russ, can I tell you something, how spot on you are with that? Because if you think about it, because I'm thinking about me real quick. I'm on YouTube and I get a comment that I don't agree with. Most of the times, to be honest with you, a comment I don't agree with is usually unprofessional in manner. They wind up attacking the person behind the idea as opposed to really giving a good, strong point against it. But there have been times where someone presents a good argument. I take note of the argument, and then I want to comment back, but it's just becomes so lengthy to do that either I'll do a show, or sometimes Russ will pick up the ball, or Joe, and they'll comment back. And I think the reason why I'm saying this is when you have that short attention span, or whatever it is, or the world that moves so rapidly, you realize that conflict is a lot longer than just removing somebody or deleting the comment or removing the friend. And I also notice sometimes on the social media platform, you can get good heart-to-heart conflict, you know, which is good. Me and Russ could argue about something, Joe, and we could have a good, healthy back and forth. We're actively engaged. There's trust. We're learning from each other. Or you can get a person who may stir up the pot, and then when you start to go argue with them, they look to get other people. So they'll just start tagging people. You know, they're not even responding back anymore. They're just like, tag everyone in group. You know, because they don't know. Yeah. They just think it's quicker for someone else now to step up, let them back away, and their effort at winning the argument really has nothing to do with their participation, but rather how many people they got next to them. And then we wind up getting frustrated because my argument wasn't with 70 fucking people. You know, my discussion was with you, Russ, and whether I was right or wrong, you know, you show me. I don't need 20 other million people to know that what we did had to be put on a public fucking platform where now this is not really about solving an issue or growing from it. This is a matter of showboating. Who's right?
Exactly.
Who's wrong? So what do we do in return? I tag Russ. I tag Joe. And I leave myself out of the dialogue as well. Believe it or not. I find myself now, and I don't think that's the right thing to do. I think the right thing to do is, like Russ said, get to that individual and say, hey, can we have this dialogue? Because I'm not doing this on a public platform here. You know, what's your concern? Let's talk and see if it could be figured out.
But you have to decide whether the conversation is worth having or not. It's like, you know, last night, you know, I had posted a couple of pictures, you know, of a couple of different you know, escort techniques or handcuffing techniques and stuff. And this guy, he says, well, I'm a DTAC instructor, and I'll tell you that technique right there is useless. I'm like, well, hold on a second. This was taught to me by a bunch of guys who didn't find it useless. I've used it thousands of times, you know, rather than go, hey, you know, this we learned it different, and I find this is more useful. But when you just out of pocket say it's useless, you know, there's no value. There's no anything in it. You're like, you know, I've used it a lot, so I can say that, you know, there is use in it. But these Gen Zers, you know, sometimes they just have no. I just said they have. It's not that they don't have a filter; they don't have a container for some of this stuff, and they just you know, completely don't even understand the nature of the conversation that you're having, and so they just, all they can do is blow things up to try and get the spotlight pointed at them. And it's very disconcerting to me because I feel that that they're missing out on a lot of things. And I also feel that the structure that's most impacted in a negative way by the amount of social media and the way we interact and so forth is that their critical thinking skills have been suppressed or underdeveloped. And, you know, I just did that. I just did that video on critical thinking skills, and they just missed the whole point. So
no, anyway, Russ, you're spot on, because listen, and I have one more thought left on this, then we could wrap this dialogue up. But the last thought to me is one of the most important thoughts. But I want to mention one more thing with Russ. I think that for us, if we're going to deal, if we have to make adjustments, our adjustments are going to have to be to not take it personal when they do that, and do what Russ did. Try to pull them aside privately, because they may not remember, this is the day and age that they grew in. And I have a feeling when a lot of people think is kind of what we mentioned, we may think on the surface that they're looking for consensus, and it makes sense. But because if you want to look at it from their perspective, if they never been through some type of conflict or whatever it is, I wouldn't even say so much it's support. It could also be approval, because they could tag a bunch of people in that group, and only one person could say, yo, you're wrong. Actually, Russ is right. And all of a sudden they freeze. They stop. That one person and the masses.
And for me,
okay, Russ.
Yeah, I'm sorry. For me, it's, you know, it's not even really about, you know, being right or wrong. Right or wrong, you know, can be subjective when we're talking techniques and things like that. But what does matter is you know, sparking the conversation at all. When you're, you know, if I go in there and tell anyone at any time about anything, as you know what, that's worthless, that's useless, then all I've done is shut down the conversation, right?
Right.
And I don't want to leave, officers out there without ways to defend themselves, without ways to be safer and more secure. I want to spark the conversation so that people continue it on and we discuss things. And it's very difficult with those type of people, and many of them are Gen Zers. It's very difficult to even have any conversation because they want it, centered completely around them. And then that's the point at which times I often just have to go, oh my God, this is a lost cause.
But Russ, you're right. So I if possible, it doesn't always work, but when you remove them around, when you move them away from the support that they're trying to gather, if again, you have to hope that they're open to this. You have a private talk with them. You remove the loss versus win and really try to resolve, because that's another thing. I can't remember. I sad to say, but when you're dealing with an inmate to some extent, and I'm not comparing them, I'm comparing the situation of human behavior and not the status of somebody. But hear me out. When you're dealing with an unruly inmate, you're not looking to resolve an issue in an area where there's too much counter influence. I can't do it. I don't have the power to do that even long term. I just can't do it. Because at that time, either I'm going to talk to Joe or everyone in the fucking unit that's stirring it up. So same thing here. All of a sudden, it goes onto a platform, and now my argument's no longer with Russ. It's with Joe. It's with Tom. It's with Pete. And all of a sudden, we are spread too thin, worrying about everyone else while this person sits back and lets everyone else fight their battles. So having said that, you remove that person from that, and you remove the win-loss, because I don't know if they may see that as a win-loss, but you want to remove that automatically. That's where it becomes tough, because if I can't remove that perspective, I'll be honest, maybe because I'm 47 now, I don't know, I'm not going to talk to you anymore. I'm trying to resolve a matter, trying to make sure that we both move forward with information that we need. Whether we agree or not, I want us to be aligned. This is a profession where lives matter. So I got to make sure that if I'm giving out advice, that we're not giving out advice because one side's right or one side's wrong, because I've been called out a few times. Russ has, Joe has. We're looking for alignment. Do we all agree that this is the right way to go? And obviously, you're not going to get it right 100% of the time. But if we continue to engage where I feel that, this guy, I'm bringing the dialogue here, and this guy keeps on bringing me down here. So this really isn't about growing the dialogue. This guy is staying to that one point, and he truly is more focused on wanting to be right. I am then going to step away and say, you know what? I'm not here to change your belief. If that's what you believe, that's what you believe. I thought maybe if it was a thought, we could work around it, maybe build some information and maybe change my thought set or your thought. But if you're too stuck in this way, and at the end of the day, if what happens to be, if my argument tends to be where we need to be, and you choose to disagree with it because now it comes from me, because that's another thing, it's not always what's right or wrong, but where it comes from, then I don't no longer want to have the dialogue because it's going to become personal. Again, I also think that's human nature, but it could be more so now, because we did say that social media has welcomed this competitive short-term, think about it, guys. Here's my dinner for today. Oh, shit, he's having that. Post a picture of your dinner. These are short-term things, but then you wind up mixing those up with long-term things like, oh, by the way, I just became an entrepreneur in 6 months. Yeah, a self-owned business, and you got one customer. But they don't put all that down. And now you got someone else who wants to run a prison because they're comparing themselves to that person who owns their own business with one customer. It's just, I don't think there's any substance to what's being seen. It's surface. And then people wind up comparing the surface as opposed to really comparing the quality that's underneath the surface. It's like I'm going to compare the title of something, but I'm not going to compare what it took. Because remember, one more difference before we get to this last thought. You want to hear something funny, guys? And I think this really does create a unique difference, is we bragged about what got us somewhere. We walked to school in snowstorms and all that stuff. That's still my generation. We bragged about those things. But now what people brag about is just getting to school. I'm at school, or just becoming that boss. Where I knew that when I sat down and I chatted with Russ, we bragged about everything that we did to get to that point to make that position a success. Because we knew the position wasn't successful. It was the journey that got us there. We were journeymen, journeywomen. We bragged about the journey. Now, people only brag about reaching to the top of Mount Everest. And they know that the more they can say they've done it alone, the better. And I think that's a big difference right now, is that we look at the surface and it's me, 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 me. And we're like, well, wait a second. Let's just get a little bit more detail behind that. So I guess the older generation bragged about the journey. The newer generation needs to show something immediately. They need an outcome. It's not about the effort. They need an outcome. And they're bragging about the outcome. How many times, guys, have we sat together, breaking bread, prison management, whatever position we're in, and we wind up going back talking about our days on a unit? We didn't brag about the day the commissioner met me and gave this, or the day that I got an award for running 3 prisons. Or no, we talked about always going back to where that day we had to run those units and how we used to police. All right, so the last thing, guys, here, keeping them challenged, we discussed. I think that you got to make sure that they know that this profession is not an end game, that it's continually challenging you. So you got to grow, and that's where the task becomes significant, because, you know, it's not about the completion of the task, but you growing from learning behind what's being done in the task. So a lot of people see that the task is done. I deserve more. It's like, no. The task was just a starting point. So that we discussed that. We discussed, well, everybody wants a positive workplace environment. So I don't see that much different than what we would want. That's not generational. They want a better work-life balance. Okay, a little bit more extreme now because of COVID and people being able to work from home, but we're first responders. If you're coming into this profession thinking that you can work from home, that's just a foolish thought to begin with. But I believe all generations want a better workplace balance. Again, more extreme now, but you're entering a field that requires you to be on site. So you shouldn't be thinking about working from home if you're going to enter corrections or picking shifts. Because at that point there are people that have been in the profession a lot longer who do deserve a better pick because of what they've sacrificed in that amount of time. And I don't think that's I don't think that's negotiable. I think if you're coming in thinking that you deserve what would be considered better shifts or better hours over someone who's devoted their time to the agency, realize that from the agency's perspective, if they did that, you wind up may have recruitment. That's great. But the people that are going to train those recruits, the people that have been loyal to me, I just stabbed in their back. So no agency should be willing to make that sacrifice and sacrifice who's loyal for bringing people in. You got to make sure that you keep these people motivated, because we need them, or else people are coming into this profession not knowing how we truly operate. And that's another thing. One last thing for his last thought is our level of effectiveness is determined literally by the people that have been loyal, that remain in the business. So if you don't keep them where they need to be, the level of effectiveness starts to lower. And when the people come in, they only know that level of effectiveness. Like if I walked into a facility that had Russ there, I know it's a 10 because Russ has core values. He operates on a 10. When Russ goes and you have newer people getting promoted, they're dropping down levels. So now when a new person comes in, they think a 7's a 10 or a 6 a 10. So if you're not maintaining good balance with that exchange and you're allowing for the seniors to go, you're slowly affecting your effectiveness. Okay, so the last one I have here, and I'll start with Russ first because I want to get this dialogue. I know you guys gave me a lot of time today, and I apologize. This is a key one. I saved this one for last. This one I think matters, and this is more on us. Younger generations prefer personal power. So they want, and what I mean by personal power, hear me out. They want leaders. So personal power is related to the leaders in front of them, above them. They want leaders who are more authentic, more human. They know how to listen. They're empathetic. They provide feedback, whatever it is, as opposed to leaders who are positional in their power. So what I meant by personal power, and I'll go with Russ first, is that leaders that have their power because the people give it to them, as opposed to people who lead through position and have the power based on the rights of the position. So Generation Zs look for people who have more personal power. That means they have power over the people because the people allow them to have that power. So they got human skills, whatnot, as opposed to those who just say, hey, you better listen to me because I'm this rank. So more of the command compliant structure. And if I may add one more thing on that, Russ, we talked about complacency a while back. Remember, we got people that want to be innovative, right? We got people that want to take this profession to the next level, especially the new generation, the Z. If you work in an environment that is command and compliant, the problem is people no longer make efforts to be innovative because they're just stuck in the command structure. So you wind up becoming complacent on initiative. But Russ, what's your thoughts on that when it comes to personal authority versus positional authority?
Yeah, I think that the Gen Z is, very much more oriented towards charisma, if you will. And I'll say that in general, that's probably a bad thing because what it means to them is they're drawn to charisma because they in turn want to be charismatic. So I think you have to be careful. You can't just say, hey, the popular kid is the popular kid, and I want to be a popular kid too. I think that's short-sighted. Also, and I've said plenty of things that are also, antithetical towards the positional structure alone. I think that, a leader can be anyone, but I think that their view of leadership is about the charismatic, is about popularity, rather than a person's, ability to actually do the job. So I would be very careful, if you're a Gen Z or out there, about idealizing, someone because they're popular. That's definitely not where we want to go, because all that does is that actually breaks up the rank structure, and it just becomes, all what we used to call, the car mentality. Hey, I'm in this car, and I'm in the other car, and we're popular over here, and there's another little, and it's cliquish, right? I guess that's the best word to describe what we used to call cars, they were cliques. And so we start to devalue, actual ability, just for being charismatic. Now, it's fine if you blend the two together and you've got some charisma and you've got some leadership skills, and you can build bridges between different factions. That's cool. But just, popularity for popularity's sake doesn't cut it in corrections, in my opinion.
No, right. Russ, you're right. If you look at the levels of leadership, one is your position, which is the starting point. The second is getting your permission to lead, which is building relationships with the people in an effort to be productive so you can gain credibility. If I'm just building relationships with people, but making no effort to be productive, I have no credibility. I'm not creating any momentum. By those that actually want to be successful, they will not relate to me. Because at the end of the day is I'm looking to be popular. I'm looking for approval as opposed to actually doing the right thing and being productive. So you're right. You don't rest on the fact that you want to be popular and build relationships. And so what are you building them for? You're building them so you could be productive and move forward, create momentum, create credibility. And then eventually what happens is the people that you lead connect to you, not basically on just what you've what do you call it? I'm sorry, basically because what you've done for them and the company, how you see them and what you've done ultimately to move them forward. And that's when you start getting those higher level individuals that want to work for you. Hey, Joe, what's your thoughts on that thought? Personal power versus the positional?
Yeah, I mean, it's not an unrealistic expectation. Everybody wants a supervisor who's a good communicator, who's a good leader, who, has good tact. And integrity values, core values. But, there's a fine line and a drawing point because, you need to have that kind of leader that has those values, but also the kind of leader that is going to call you out when you mess up and put a foot in your ass and keep you moving forward. So you can't have one without the other. Everybody wants that communicator. Everybody wants, the supervisor. The supervisors want the people behind them, but like I said, there's a fine line between the supervision and the necessities of what you have to do and what you need to do for your people.
Yeah, and And guys, I know there was a lot here. We didn't expect this dialogue to go this long. It was only supposed to be about an hour, but you know, it's good to get these thoughts. And believe it or not, this is only a starting point. I mean, we really have to try to figure out how to discuss this in real time. But I think it gives a good perspective of where both areas have to make adjustments. But I do lean on us making more of the adjustment, because this is where the future is headed. So we have to figure out a way to kind of keep the core values there, but also try to see where they're going, or where they're coming from and where they're headed. Hey, Joe, you have any closing thoughts?
Yeah. You know, biggest thing is communicate. And I mean, you know, not via Facebook, not via Twitter, not via text, you know, communicate with your people, both sides of the fence. If you're the incoming generation, you got to learn to communicate with your uppers. If you're in the upper administration, then you need to make sure that you're utilizing your communication skills with other people. You know, I was always a big thing about management by walking around, you know, ask the questions. You'd be surprised at what some of the answers are. Don't be so quick to throw the towel in and call it quits. You know, it's a good profession. There's a lot of good there. There's a lot of self-worth there. And, you know, there's a lot of values that you guys bring to the table that we can use for the agency that some of us older folks don't see anymore. You know, show the initiative, you know, have realistic expectations. And, you know, like I said, most of all, communicate.
Yeah. And what do you got, Russ?
You know, it's a, you know, if you're a Gen Zer out there, you know, and you really want to get good at this job, you know, be cognizant of just exactly what your North Star is. And if you've got shit for a North Star, figure out the values that you need to move you along the way in a manner where you can, you know, satisfy and fulfill what it is that drives you, but that you can satisfy and fulfill what drives other people along the way. And through that, you'll actually be successful. And, you know, there's a lot of resources out there that can help you accomplish it. One of them is this forum right here. There's other forums out there that can help you along the way too, and avail yourself of those opportunities. You know, don't wall yourself off to the knowledge that's out there, because much of it is truly evergreen, and some of it just needs to be brought back around again. I know I've probably forgotten more than I know right now. Excuse me, but I'm always willing to help anyone who's willing to, you know, sit down and listen and learn.
Yeah, and guys, real quick, diversity, obviously, when it comes to diversity, generational diversity is probably one of the biggest things we have in corrections. I even think departmental diversity could also be one. But basically, when you're a good leader, you're able to figure out how to use that diverse environment, combine all parts, and truly get something innovative, because innovation is really not just myopic. It's a collection of all things. And there's a quote by George Bernard Shaw that kind of, I think it's looking at two extremes, and then how they bring it together. And sometimes we could see generations as extremes in their thinking, when technically they gradually bleed into each other. It only becomes really extreme when one's removed from the middle, but usually they're gradually kind of bleeding into each other. So if you're at a workplace, if you know how to control that, you know, and how to kind of keep it blended, keep it smooth, as opposed to allowing things to jump over. But George Bernard Shaw said it best, I think, and we can end on this. Both optimists, and this is just related to extremes, both optimists and pessimists contribute to society. The optimist invents the airplane, the pessimist, the parachute. So I thought that's a pretty awesome quote. As always, guys, the show is Tear Up. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify every time I post a video. Stay safe.